My name is Paulette Chapman, and I serve as Director of Adult Faith Formation here at St. John and Paul Parish in Altoona, Iowa. For several years now, we have set aside the Thursdays during Lent for prayer. The church is open for private prayer beginning after our 9 a.m. Mass and concluding with a 6:30 p.m. communal prayer experience. We are all encouraged to take some extra time for prayer on these Lenten Thursdays, whether here at the church or on our own. Our fourth Thursday prayer experience will be March 11th at 6:30 p.m. We will pray Vespers together. It will be live streamed on YouTube with a link on Facebook for those who are unable to join us in person. Since antiquity, people have tried to mark and measure time. Centuries ago, the Aztec people, after careful observation of the sun, the moon, and the stars, came up with this surprisingly detailed and complex and accurate representation of time in this calendar. In ancient times, people would often use an hourglass to keep track of time. This is a smaller version of an hourglass, which actually marks about a minute's time. My husband is named after his paternal grandfather, and so he became the owner of Grandpa's pocket watch. You can see that this 100-year-old watch is well worn from all the decades that Grandpa took it in and out of his pocket to keep track of his time. And we have found that if we wind it, it will still keep time. Of course, electricity entered the picture, and so we have clocks like this alarm clock that is operated with battery power. Many of us keep a calendar to keep track of important days like birthdays and anniversaries, as well as our appointments and other commitments. And of course, in our digital age, your smartphone or your smartwatch seems to be able to do it all. You can set a timer for cooking, you can use it as a stopwatch, set an alarm, and of course, we can keep our calendars on our phone, and it will even give us a verbal reminder of our appointments. It seems like they can do everything. Christians have also had particular ways to mark time. We're all familiar with our liturgical calendar, and we know that our church year, or our liturgical year, is a little bit different than our regular calendar year. It begins with the first Sunday of Advent, usually in early December, and ends on the Feast of Christ the King at the end of November. We are aware that right now we are in the season of Lent, where we are preparing for Easter and the 50-day Easter season that follows. Christians have also marked time with prayer using the Liturgy of the Hours. The history of the Liturgy of the Hours goes clear back to New Testament times. We know from the Gospels that Jesus attended the communal prayer experiences at the synagogue, and he commanded his disciples to pray regularly. Paul encouraged his followers to pray without ceasing, as in his letter to the Thessalonians, as well as the letter to the Ephesians. The book of the Acts of the Apostles said that the early Christians gathered daily for prayer on a regular basis. As early as the 3rd century, we have evidence that it was a common practice for Christians to gather together for prayer in the morning and the evening. And during those early centuries, monasticism flourished. Monasticism is the institution of monks or nuns living together in community, sharing life, work, and prayer. And in many of those communities, daily prayer became highly developed. They would stop for several times during the day and sometimes even wake up in the night to pray together. And often that prayer was based on the Psalms. Of course, people who had to work and raise families didn't have the ability to stop for extended times of prayer multiple times a day, and so the prayer of the monks and the nuns was modified for the average person. Over time, though, the Liturgy of the Hours, or daily prayer, became mostly the task of clergy and those living in religious communities, and the practice was largely lost to the average Christian. The Second Vatican Council brought about many liturgical reforms, including a reform of the Liturgy of the Hours. It streamlined the hours for prayer and the practice of daily prayer. Morning prayer, or lauds as it is known in Latin, and evening prayer, or vespers, became the main hours of prayer on which the other ones hinged. The Second Vatican Council also emphasized that daily prayer, or the Liturgy of the Hours, be available to all believers, and therefore clergy were not required to be present when lay people gathered to pray these prayers. And in fact, people were encouraged to pray the Liturgy of the Hours alone if they were not able to access an experience of praying it in community. So this Thursday, we will pray Vespers together. The word Vespers means evening star in Latin. Evening prayer, or Vespers, is the prayer that we pray as light fades and darkness falls. We typically begin Vespers with a hymn, followed by praying 2 psalms, usually with a prayer after each. The Canticle of Mary is sung. We also know this canticle as the Magnificat. There are intercessions, the Lord's Prayer, and typically a closing prayer. So why do we continue to pray this ancient form of prayer today? Well, first of all, it unites us with the prayer of the church throughout the world. And it reminds us that time is sacramental. God reveals God's self in time, in the ebb and flow of our daily, weekly, and yearly lives. The prayer of the church nurtures our expectation of God's reign of love, justice, and mercy, and it motivates us to act with charity and justice. So please join us, if you can, in person or virtually, to pray this ancient and ever-new prayer, asking God to sanctify our days and nights and lead us to the kingdom.